I want to ask you something before we get into today's content. When was the last time you gave genuine, unhurried, fully attentive care to your partner's breasts? Not as a brief stop on the way to somewhere else. Not as a perfunctory acknowledgement before moving on, but genuine, prolonged, present, and intentional attention that communicated that this part of her body and the whole of her in it deserved your complete focus and care. For most men over 60, the honest answer reveals a significant gap between the attention this part of their partner's body receives and what it is capable of responding to with the right approach, and closing that gap, understanding the neurological, anatomical, and emotional dimensions of how a woman over 50 and 60 experiences breast stimulation. And what she needs from the man giving it is what today's video is entirely about. I am Dr. Julia Rhodes, a men's sex therapist with over a decade of experience working with different couples and helping men regain their sexual health and strength back. Breast play is one of those topics that receives either no serious clinical attention or the wrong kind of attention. The kind that focuses on technique divorced from the emotional context that makes technique meaningful. Today, I am giving you both the clinical understanding and the practical guidance that will allow you to transform your approach to this dimension of intimacy in ways that your partner will feel immediately and remember for a long time. Before we get into the content, please subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications if you have not already. Every week, I publish clinically grounded, genuinely practical content on men's sexual and relational health. Share this video with a man in your life whose intimate relationship would benefit from this understanding. And now, let us get into the 5 principles. Before I go any further into the research, and I want to make sure you have everything you need to act on what I am sharing today, I want to tell you about something I have created for the men on this channel. Because here is the thing, understanding that sexual activity matters for your health is important. But knowing what to do about it, especially if you are navigating performance challenges, or if the intimacy in your relationship has become complicated, or if you simply want a complete guided step-by-step framework for your sexual health after 60, that requires more than a single video. I created a program that pieces the entire puzzle of men's sexual health together. From fixing erection and performance challenges from both the physical and the psychological angle to specific techniques and approaches that make a man genuinely exceptional in bed after 60. Not despite his age, but because of the deeper understanding and intentional skill that comes with it, to how to bring your partner to the same level of desire as you so that intimacy becomes a shared, mutual, deeply satisfying experience again, rather than something you are pursuing alone. Everything pieced together, every piece connected like someone guiding you by the hand from the very beginning to the very end. I made a full video walking through exactly what the program covers and why it works. That video is pinned in the comment section right now. The link is also in the video description below. Go watch it after this video ends because what we covered today is one essential foundational principle. And that program is the complete picture that goes with it. Now, back to the science, because what comes next is something most men have genuinely never heard explained clearly. Let's begin. What has changed and why it matters? Before we cover the 5 principles themselves, I want to address something that is directly relevant to men in this age group, and that distinguishes the guidance I am sharing today from general advice about breast stimulation that is not calibrated to your specific situation. Your partner, if she is in the same age range, is most likely postmenopausal or in the later stages of premenopause. The hormonal changes of this transition, specifically the decline in estrogen that accompanies it, produce documented and meaningful changes in breast tissue that directly affect how it responds to stimulation and what it needs from that stimulation to feel pleasurable rather than uncomfortable. Estrogen supports the density and hydration of breast tissue, the elasticity of the skin of the breast, the sensitivity and responsiveness of the nerve endings throughout the breast, and the engorgement response of the breast during arousal. As estrogen declines, the breast tissue becomes less dense. The skin may become thinner and more delicate, and the arousal engorgement response, while still present, may take longer to develop and may be less pronounced. The practical implications are straightforward. First, the approach needs to be gentler. Pressure and friction that would have been pleasurable for her in younger decades may now feel too rough or even mildly uncomfortable, because the skin of the breast is more delicate and the tissue beneath it more sensitive to pressure in a different way. Second, the buildup needs to be longer. The arousal engorgement that increases breast sensitivity and makes stimulation feel deeply pleasurable requires more time to develop, which means more unhurried patient attention before the stimulation of the breast itself will be at its most responsive. Third, the emotional dimension is more important than ever. As I will discuss throughout today's video, the emotional context of intimate touch shapes the physiological response to it at a neurological level that is directly relevant to the quality of the physical experience. Additionally, many women over 50 and 60 carry body image concerns about their breasts that are more conscious and more specifically relevant in intimate moments than they were in younger decades. Gravity, the visual changes of aging, and the thin skin and reduced density of postmenopausal breast tissue combined with the cultural standard of youth-associated breast aesthetics to create a context in which many older women feel self-conscious about this part of their bodies. Understanding this and responding to it with the genuine, specific, unconditional appreciation that your partner's body at this age deserves is not merely a courteous addition to today's guidance. It is a clinical prerequisite for the other 5 principles to work. Principle 1. Build genuine anticipation through the approach. The most important principle in this entire video, the one that determines whether everything else that follows lands as it is capable of landing, is this. The approach to the breast must be as unhurried, attentive, and intentionally pleasurable as everything that happens after. The neurological basis for this is the principle I have covered extensively in other videos on this channel. Sexual arousal in women is a gradual physiological process, not an instant state. For a woman over 60, the timeline of this arousal process is longer than it was in younger decades. And the full arousal response, including the breast engorgement and nipple erection that make breast stimulation most pleasurable, requires extended appropriate stimulation to develop fully. When you move to direct breast stimulation before this arousal process is adequately advanced, you are asking the breast tissue to respond in ways that it is not yet physiologically prepared to respond to. The anticipation buildup I am describing begins long before you touch her breasts at all. It begins with the quality of your attention in the earlier stages of intimacy, the warmth of your presence, the genuine appreciation you communicate for her specifically, the unhurried quality of your touch on other parts of her body, the specific and sincere things you say about her and her body. These inputs are not preamble. They are the arousal process itself, and they are the conditions under which her nervous system moves progressively toward the state of full physiological readiness, in which breast stimulation becomes deeply pleasurable rather than merely tolerable. When you do begin moving toward her breasts, the approach should be genuinely gradual. Begin with kisses, touch, and attention to her neck, collarbone, and shoulders. Let your hands move along the outer curves of her body. Approach the breast from the outside and below, spending time on the areas adjacent to the breast rather than the breast itself. This circumnavigation creates anticipation in the most physiologically meaningful sense. The nerve endings of the breast tissue become progressively aware of how close the stimulation is getting without yet receiving it, which produces a building sensitivity that makes the eventual contact considerably more pleasurable than it would have been had it arrived immediately. For men over 60 who feel any urgency around erectile maintenance or erection timing, I want to address this directly. The investment of time in this unhurried approach is not wasted time. The quality of her arousal at the moment you do provide direct breast stimulation determines the quality of her response, and therefore the quality of the entire intimate encounter. The approach is not a delay of the real thing. It is the beginning of it. I also want to name something that is specifically relevant to long-term couples in this age group, which is the large majority of men watching this video. In long-term relationships, the approach to intimacy can become abbreviated over time in ways that neither partner consciously chose. The unhurried circumnavigation, the prolonged attention to areas adjacent to the breast before moving to the breast itself, the extensive neck and shoulder and collarbone attention that primes the arousal system. All of these can erode gradually until they disappear entirely from the intimate pattern. What remains is a considerably shortened version of the encounter that moves to direct stimulation much faster than the female body can optimally respond to. Restoring the approach, returning to the unhurried, attentive progression that allows arousal to develop fully, is one of the highest leverage changes available in a long-term intimate relationship and produces results that both partners feel immediately. Principle 2, begin with the lightest possible touch and let her body guide the escalation. When direct contact with the breast begins, the first and most important instruction I can give you is this. Start with a touch that is lighter than you think is necessary, considerably lighter. For the reasons I described in the opening section, the breast tissue of a woman over 60 responds most initially to very light feather-like stimulation that activates the surface mechanoreceptors, the nerve endings closest to the skin rather than the deeper pressure receptors. These surface mechanoreceptors are exquisitely sensitive and produce arousal signals that travel directly through the pudendal nerve connections I described in my video on the neurological connection between breast stimulation and clitoral response. Use the pads of your fingertips to trace the very lightest patterns across the outer curves and the underside of the breast. Move with deliberate slowness, varying the direction of your movement, unpredictably so that her nervous system cannot habituate to the pattern and remains continuously responsive. Avoid the nipple and areola at this stage entirely. This deliberate avoidance creates a specific and powerful effect. Every nerve ending in the breast becomes progressively sensitized by the light stimulation of the surrounding tissue, while the nipple and areola unaddressed become increasingly primed for when contact does eventually arrive. Pay genuine, continuous attention to her breathing and her body. Her breath is your most reliable, real-time guide. When it deepens and slows, you are activating her arousal response correctly. When it catches or quickens slightly, you have found an area of particular sensitivity. When her body moves toward your touch, she is communicating clearly that what you are doing is working and that she would welcome more. These signals are her body speaking to you. And listening to them with genuine attentiveness rather than following a preset sequence is what produces a genuinely personalized experience rather than a technically competent but impersonal one. As her arousal deepens and her body communicates its readiness, gradually introduce more pressure. Move from the lightest fingertip tracing to a slightly firmer, fuller hand contact. Cup the breast gently. Allow your palm to make contact with more of the breast surface. Let the escalation be continuous and gradual, always calibrated to her responses rather than to a predetermined pace. Principle 3. Give the areola and nipple the specific attention they deserve. The areola, the pigmented circular area surrounding the nipple, is one of the most densely innervated areas of the breast and one of the most consistently overlooked. Most men either skip the areola and go directly to the nipple or treat it merely as the border region around their actual destination. Both of these approaches miss the physiological reality that the areola is rich in its own nerve endings, that these nerve endings respond specifically to the light circular stimulation pattern I am about to describe, and that adequately priming the areola before stimulating the nipple directly makes the eventual nipple stimulation dramatically more intense. Use your fingertips to trace slow, gentle circles around the perimeter of the areola, gradually spiraling inward toward the nipple over the course of 30 seconds to a minute. Alternate between your fingertips and the flat of your tongue, switching without warning so that her nervous system continues to receive varied, unpredictable stimulation. The variation between fingertip and tongue, between light dry contact and warm wet contact, produces a sensory contrast that keeps arousal building continuously rather than plateauing. For women over 60, I want to address something specific about nipple sensitivity that is often misunderstood. Post-menopausal hormonal changes can affect nipple sensitivity in two directions. Some women find their nipples become more sensitive and require gentler handling than they did in younger decades, while others find that they require slightly more sustained stimulation to reach the same level of arousal response. Your partner's individual experience will differ from any general pattern, which is why attentiveness to her specific responses throughout is essential. What feels perfect one day may need adjustment on another. And the only way to know is to pay attention rather than to rely on remembered patterns. When you do move to direct nipple stimulation, begin gently, regardless of what you remember working well in the past. Light circles with the tongue, the softest possible suction, gentle rolling between fingertips. Offer more intensity only as her responses specifically invite it, not as a default escalation pattern. For some women, the gentlest sustained stimulation produces the most powerful response. For others, slightly firmer handling is what generates deep arousal. Her body will tell you which she needs on any given day if you are genuinely listening to it. The key principle that applies throughout this entire section is variety. The nervous system habituates to any stimulation pattern that remains constant for long enough, which means that a single unchanging technique applied continuously will produce diminishing sensation over time, regardless of how well chosen it is. Alternating between the areola and the nipple, between your fingertips and your tongue, between light tracing and slightly firmer contact between one breast and the other, maintains the quality of sensation by preventing habituation and keeping the nerve endings continuously and actively responsive. This is not complexity for its own sake. It is a neurological necessity for sustained building arousal. Principle 4, integrate breast stimulation with full body engagement. This principle addresses what I consider one of the most important differences between adequate breast stimulation and genuinely powerful breast stimulation: the engagement of the whole body rather than the breast in isolation. Female arousal is not localized. It is a whole nervous system, whole body experience. And one of the most consistent things that limits the depth of arousal and pleasure women experience is the reduction of intimate attention to a single area of the body at a time. When all of a partner's attention is directed exclusively at the breasts with no engagement of the rest of her body, the arousal that has been building through the broader physical engagement of earlier intimacy can actually narrow and concentrate, rather than continuing to build and spread. The experience becomes focused and limited rather than distributed and deepening. The integration I am describing means allowing your attention, your hands, your mouth, and your physical presence to remain in active caring engagement with her whole body as you attend to her breasts. As one hand attends to a breast, the other explores the curve of her waist, the warmth of her inner thigh, the length of her back. Your mouth may be at her breast while your hands are at her hips. Your lips move from a nipple to her neck and back. The whole body engagement does not distract from the breast stimulation. It amplifies it because the entire nervous system remains aroused and responsive rather than narrowing its attention to a single zone. For men over 60, this principle is worth emphasizing with particular care because the whole body engagement I am describing keeps the encounter moving and alive in a way that maintains your own arousal and engagement as effectively as it maintains hers. There is a dynamic, reciprocal quality to full-body, intimate attention that sustains the energy and presence of the encounter for both partners rather than allowing it to plateau. When both partners are sufficiently aroused and the timing is right, combining direct clitoral stimulation with breast stimulation creates a neurological resonance that is qualitatively different from either form of stimulation alone. The neurological overlap between breast stimulation and clitoral stimulation, which I discussed in detail in my earlier video on this subject, means that activating both pathways simultaneously creates a layered and amplified arousal response. For women who have never experienced orgasm through breast stimulation alone, this simultaneous engagement of both pathways is often the configuration in which that experience becomes accessible for the first time. Principle 5. Use sensory contrast and temperature variation to deepen sensitivity. The fifth principle introduces an element that most men have never incorporated into breast play despite its physiological effectiveness: the deliberate use of sensory contrast, particularly temperature contrast, to heighten the sensitivity of the breast tissue and create a quality of sensation that goes beyond what touch alone produces. The mechanism is straightforward. The thermoreceptors in the skin of the breast respond to temperature change with heightened sensitivity. When the skin experiences a transition from cold to warm or warm to cold, these receptors are activated at a higher level of responsiveness than they are by sustained temperature in either direction. The areas of skin that have experienced this thermal contrast become measurably more sensitive to subsequent touch, and the alternation of temperatures keeps the nervous system actively responding rather than habituating. In practical terms, this can be as simple as an ice cube traced with deliberate slowness across the outer curves of the breast, followed immediately by the warmth of your mouth against the same area. The cold activates the thermoreceptors. Your warm mouth against the sensitized skin creates an intense contrast that produces sensation that is difficult to achieve through touch alone. For most women, this is deeply pleasurable when introduced at the right stage of arousal, meaning after the breast tissue is already engaged and sensitized rather than at the beginning of the encounter. Warm massage oil gently warmed in your hands before application provides a different kind of sensory contrast and the additional benefit of allowing your hands to move across the breast surface with a quality of gliding contact that feels categorically different from dry touch. A soft feather, when you have built sufficient arousal, activates a completely different category of nerve endings. The C-tactile afferents that respond specifically to extremely light stroking touch, and that produce a quality of pleasurable sensation distinct from anything firmer contact can generate. All of these variations share the common principle of keeping the nervous system of the breast actively responding rather than habituating to a single unchanging stimulus. The nervous system responds most powerfully and most continuously to novelty and variation, and maintaining that variation throughout the encounter keeps her arousal continuously building rather than plateauing at whatever level a single approach can sustain. I want to add something specifically for couples who have been together for many years because the temperature and sensory contrast dimension of breast play is one that tends to be among the earliest casualties of long-term relationship intimacy. Couples who have been together for decades often find that their intimate encounters have narrowed toward familiar, reliable patterns that produce adequate pleasure, but that no longer produce the sense of discovery and heightened sensation that characterized earlier intimacy. Introducing sensory contrast is one of the most accessible and most immediately effective ways to expand a long-established intimate pattern. It does not require conversation, planning, or elaborate preparation. It requires only a willingness to bring something new into a familiar encounter and to pay attention to her response when you do. The response for most women who have not experienced this kind of deliberate sensory variation in their intimate life is typically significant enough to be genuinely surprising and genuinely motivating for continued exploration. The foundation beneath all 5 principles: emotional safety and genuine presence. I want to close with something that sits beneath every one of the 5 principles I have described and without which none of them reach their full potential. Her experience of breast stimulation and her capacity to receive genuine pleasure through it is directly and powerfully shaped by how safe, seen, and genuinely desired she feels in your presence. This is not a soft or secondary consideration. It is the primary one. The nervous system of a woman who feels emotionally safe with her partner, who trusts that she is genuinely desired rather than being used as a means to an end, who believes that her comfort and pleasure matter as much to her partner as his own, is in a physiological state that is fundamentally different from the nervous system of a woman who carries anxiety, self-consciousness, or a sense of obligation into intimate moments, and the physiological difference translates directly into the quality of pleasure she can access. For women over 60, this emotional dimension carries specific weight. The body image concerns I mentioned at the opening of this video are real and present for many women in this age group. The cultural messaging that frames female desirability primarily in terms of youthful physical characteristics creates a context in which many older women approach intimate moments with a quiet layer of self-consciousness that narrows their capacity for full pleasure. When you as her partner communicate genuine, specific, unconditional appreciation for her body exactly as it is through your words, your attention, the quality of your touch, and the unhurried care with which you approach her, you are doing something that directly and physiologically expands her capacity for pleasure. You are removing the self-protective narrowing that self-consciousness creates and replacing it with the neurological safety that allows full arousal and full pleasure to develop, Talk to her not in a formal procedural way. Naturally, warmly, genuinely. Tell her what you appreciate. Ask her what she enjoys. Receive whatever she shares with openness and gratitude rather than defensiveness. Create the conversational and relational environment in which her honest responses to your touch, both what works and what she would like differently, are welcomed rather than evaluated. This openness, this genuine curiosity about her specific experience, is itself one of the most powerful things you can offer. I am Dr. Julia Rodesis, a men's sex therapist with over a decade of experience working with different couples and helping men regain their sexual health and strength back. If today's video gave you something genuinely new and clinically useful for this dimension of your intimate relationship, please do 3 things right now. Hit the like button because it helps more men over 60 find this content when they need it. Leave a comment below and tell me which of today's 5 principles you are most committed to bringing into your intimate life, because I read every single comment and your responses shape what I create for this community every week. And please subscribe with notifications on if you have not already, because every week I am here with the honest, evidence-based, genuinely practical guidance on men's sexual and relational health that you deserve. I will see you in the next